I didn't realize how much I had lost until I heard my own voice. Actually heard it for the first time in what felt like decades. It happened in a parking lot of all places, some random Tuesday afternoon, and I was arguing with a customer service representative about a phone bill. My voice came out sharp, clear, unwilling to bend. And when I won that argument, when that representative finally said, "You're absolutely right, ma'am, I'll waive that fee," I sat in my car afterward and cried. Because I remembered what it felt like to be heard, and I realized I'd forgotten that feeling existed. When the envelope showed up at my new apartment, forwarded from an address I hadn't lived at in 8 months, I almost threw it in the trash with the rest of the junk mail. But something about the weight of it, the quality of the paper, made me pause. I opened it standing over my kitchen sink, and when I read what was inside, my hands went numb. An invitation to his engagement party, with a handwritten note at the bottom that made my stomach turn. "It would mean the world if you could come celebrate with us. Let's show everyone how far we've both come." The audacity of it stole my breath. I'm looking at the numbers, and it breaks my heart. 80% of you watch these stories of women being betrayed, and you leave without hitting subscribe. Is that who we are? People who watch the fire but won't help put it out. If you believe that a mother's legacy is sacred, that no woman should ever be erased from her own story, that no man should be allowed to rewrite history to make himself the hero, then prove it. Subscribe right now and comment where you are watching from. Don't let my story be just another video you scroll past. Stand with me. My name is Alora Dickson, and I need you to understand something before I go any further. I wasn't always this quiet. There was a version of me, back in college, back when I was studying architecture at Howard University, who could walk into any room and own it. I organized protests. I ran the Black Student Union. I had opinions about everything, and I wasn't afraid to share them. My professors used to joke that I'd either end up running a Fortune 500 company or starting a revolution. Maybe both. Then I met him at a gallery, opening in D.C. His name was Julian Westbrook. He was a curator at a small contemporary art gallery in Georgetown, the kind of place that smelled like money and tasted like wine you pretended to understand. He had this way of looking at you like you were the only person in the room, like whatever you were saying was the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. That night, I was there with my roommate, wearing a thrift store dress I'd altered myself, carrying a portfolio of designs I was too nervous to show anyone. Julian found me standing in front of a sculpture, some abstract metal thing that was supposed to represent the fragmentation of modern identity, according to the placard, and he asked me what I thought. Most people don't actually want to know what you think. They want you to agree with them or say something impressive, but something about the way he asked made me answer honestly. "I think it's trying too hard," I said. Like the artist was more interested in being profound than in actually saying something. He laughed, really laughed. Then he said, "That's the most honest thing anyone said in this room all night." We talked for 3 hours. About art, about architecture, about growing up Black in America, about the difference between being seen and being visible. He told me about his childhood in Connecticut, about being one of the only Black kids in his private school, about learning to code switch before he even knew what that meant. I told him about growing up in Jamaica, Queens, about my mother who cleaned houses to pay for my education, about designing my first building on graph paper when I was 9 years old. By the end of the night, he'd introduced me to half the people in that gallery. He made me feel like I belonged there. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. He did it at the gallery where we'd met, in front of that same sculpture I'd criticized. He'd commissioned a new piece to replace it, a beautiful architectural model of a building I'd designed in one of my classes, cast in bronze, mounted on marble. "You said that sculpture was trying too hard to be profound," he said. "This one doesn't have to try, it just is." How could I say no to that? We got married at his family's estate in the Hamptons. It was beautiful, expensive, nothing like the wedding my mother and I had quietly planned, the small church ceremony in Queens, the Caribbean food, the cousin who DJ'd for free. Julian's mother had other ideas. She hired a wedding planner. She had opinions about the guest list, the flowers, the menu, the music. Every time I suggested something, she'd smile. That tight, polite smile rich white women perfect in finishing school, and say, "That's lovely, dear, but let me show you what I was thinking." I convinced myself it didn't matter. It was one day. We'd have a lifetime to do things our way. But that's the thing about giving up pieces of yourself. You think it's just one piece, just one day, just one decision. You don't realize you're building a pattern until you look down and there's nothing left of the person you used to be. The first year of marriage was an adjustment. We lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights that his parents helped us buy. I was working at a mid-sized architecture firm in Manhattan, designing corporate offices and luxury condos. Not exactly the affordable housing projects I dreamed about in college, but it was work. It was a start. Julian's career was taking off. He'd been promoted to senior curator. He was traveling constantly, art fairs in Basel, auctions in London, exhibitions in Tokyo. I was proud of him. I was also alone a lot. When he was home, we hosted dinner parties. Lots of them. His colleagues, his clients, his parents' friends. I'd spend days planning these dinners, cooking elaborate meals, setting the table just right, making sure everything was perfect. Julian would introduce me as my wife, Alora, the architect, and I'd smile and answer the same polite questions about what I was working on. And then the conversation would shift back to art, to Julian's latest acquisition, to whatever wealthy collector was bidding on whatever piece. I started to notice that he only introduced me as the architect when it made him look good. When we were at his parents' house or at events with their friends, I was just my wife. No profession, no dreams, just an accessory. But I told myself I was being sensitive, insecure. He loved me. He'd married me. That had to mean something. Then came the night everything shifted. We were at a fundraiser for the gallery. Black tie, champagne, people in gowns that cost more than my monthly salary. I was standing with a group of Julian's colleagues when one of them, a woman named Patricia who ran a gallery in Chelsea, asked me about my work. I just won a competition to design a community center in Bed-Stuy. It was a huge deal for me, my first project that actually mattered, something that would serve the community I came from. I was excited. I started explaining the design, the community input process, the sustainability features. Patricia seemed genuinely interested. She asked smart questions. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Then Julian walked over. "What are we talking about?" he asked, slipping an arm around my waist. "Alora was just telling me about her community center project," Patricia said. "It sounds incredible." Julian smiled. "She's being modest. It's a small project, but she's passionate about it. That's what I love about her. She finds meaning in the little things." The little things. I felt something crack inside my chest. Patricia's expression shifted slightly, polite discomfort, and the conversation moved on. Later that night, in the car ride home, I brought it up. "Why did you do that?" I asked. "Do what?" "Dismiss my project like that, in front of Patricia." He looked genuinely confused. "I didn't dismiss it. I was proud of you." "You called it a small project. You made it sound like a hobby." "Alora," he sighed, that particular sigh that said I was being difficult. "I was trying to be supportive. You're so sensitive sometimes." And just like that, the crack sealed over. Because maybe I was being sensitive. Maybe I was reading into things. Maybe I was the problem. That's how it works, you know, not all at once, just slowly. A comment here, a dismissal there. A pattern you don't recognize until you're already caught in it. I got pregnant a year later. We hadn't planned it, but Julian seemed happy. His mother was thrilled. Finally, a grandchild to carry on the Westbrook name. My mother flew in from Queens to help me prepare the nursery. I was 5 months along when I lost the baby. It happened on a Thursday. I'd been feeling off all day, cramping, spotting, but I convinced myself it was normal. When the pain got worse, I called Julian. He was in Miami for Art Basel. "I'm sure it's fine," he said, "but call the doctor if you're worried." I called the doctor. She told me to go to the emergency room immediately. I called Julian back. "Do you need me to come home?" he asked. There was noise in the background, voices, music, the sound of a party. "I think so," I said. My voice was shaking. "Let me see if I can get a flight out tomorrow morning. Keep me posted, okay?" He didn't come home. I lost the baby alone in a hospital room in Brooklyn, while my husband closed a deal on a Basquiat at an art fair in Florida. He came home 2 days later with flowers and apologies. He held me while I cried. He said all the right things. But something had broken that couldn't be fixed with flowers. I threw myself into work after that. It was easier than dealing with the grief, with the growing distance between Julian and me, with the realization that I'd married someone who would always put his career, his image, his world before me. The community center project became my obsession. I was there almost every day during construction, working with the contractors, making sure every detail was right. It opened 6 months later to a standing room-only crowd. Local news covered it. The mayor sent a representative. People from the neighborhood came up to me afterward with tears in their eyes, thanking me for creating something beautiful for them. Julian didn't come to the opening. He had a gallery event in Berlin. That's when I started to understand. I had spent 5 years making myself smaller so he could feel bigger, and he hadn't even noticed. The unraveling didn't start with a revelation. It started with a scarf. I was doing laundry, his laundry, because somehow that had become my job even though we both worked full-time, and I found a silk scarf tucked into the pocket of his jacket. It was expensive, beautiful, not mine. I held it for a long time, this delicate piece of fabric that smelled like perfume I didn't wear. When Julian came home that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table with the scarf in front of me. "What's this?" I asked. He glanced at it, barely paused. "Oh, that's Simone's. She left it in my car after the gallery event last week. I kept meaning to return it." Simone, his new assistant. 24 years old, art history degree from Yale, legs that went on for days. "She was in your car." We grabbed drinks after the event. Networking, you know how it is. I did know how it was. I also knew he was lying. I didn't confront him. Not then. Because I'd learned over the years that confronting Julian didn't get you the truth. It got you a performance, a carefully constructed explanation that made you feel crazy for asking in the first place. Instead, I started paying attention. The late nights that became later, the business trips that multiplied, the way he'd take phone calls in the other room and come back with his expression just slightly rearranged. The credit card statements showing dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together. I wasn't snooping. I was just finally seeing what had been there all along. Then came the night I found the emails. He'd left his laptop open on the dining room table. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just going to close it so the cat wouldn't walk across the keyboard like she always did. But the screen was on his email, and the most recent message was from Simone. The subject line was, "Last night." I should have closed the laptop. I should have walked away, but my hands moved before my brain could stop them. The email was short. "I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again?" I scrolled down. His response, "Soon, I promise. Just need to handle some things at home first." Some things at home. I was some things at home. I sat down, read through the entire thread. 6 months of messages, plans to meet, hotels I didn't recognize, promises I'd heard him make to me once upon a time. When I heard his key in the door, I didn't move. He walked in, saw me sitting there, saw his laptop open, and his face did something I'd never seen before. It went completely blank, like he was deciding in real time which version of himself to present. "Alora." "Don't." My voice came out steady, calm. It surprised both of us. "Just don't." "It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Julian?" "Because what I think is that you've been sleeping with your assistant for 6 months, while I've been here playing the dutiful wife, cooking your dinners, hosting your parties, pretending not to notice that you've checked out of this marriage." He sat down across from me, ran his hands through his hair. The performance was starting. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said. We have a connection. She understands my work in a way that... In a way that I don't. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Julian? Say it clearly. For once in your life, say something clearly. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. The truth he'd been hiding for years. He didn't love me anymore. Maybe he never had. Maybe he'd loved the idea of me, the successful black architect from Queens who made him look progressive, who fit nicely into the narrative he was building about himself. But the actual me, the woman sitting in front of him, he didn't even see her. I think we should separate, he said quietly. And just like that, 5 years ended. The divorce wasn't ugly in the way divorces usually are. There was no screaming, no thrown dishes, no dramatic public scenes. It was worse, it was cold. Julian had already consulted a lawyer before he told me he wanted a divorce. He'd already moved money around. He'd already prepared. I was still processing the betrayal when he served me with papers. His lawyer was ruthless. They tried to claim that the brownstone was his separate property because his parents had helped with the down payment. They tried to minimize my contributions to our shared life. They painted me as a gold digger who'd trapped a successful man and was now trying to take everything. My lawyer, a sharp woman from Brooklyn named Denise, who took one look at their filings and said, "Oh, they want to play dirty. Let's play," fought back hard. We settled after 4 months. I got a fair division of assets, but I didn't fight for the brownstone. I didn't want it. That house had never been mine anyway. I found a small apartment in Fort Greene. 1 bedroom, exposed brick, a window that overlooked a community garden. It was the first place that had felt like mine in years. I thought the divorce would be the end of Julian in my life. I was wrong. He started showing up places. Not physically, he was too smart for that, but socially, professionally. I'd get invited to an architecture conference and find out he was on a panel about the intersection of art and design. I'd attend a fundraiser for a community organization, and he'd be there with Simone on his arm, playing the role of the philanthropist who cared about the community. He was rewriting the narrative, turning himself into the good guy, the man who'd grown, who'd learned, who'd moved on to something more authentic. And people believed it. They believed it because Julian was good at his job, not his actual job, but the job of being Julian Westbrook. The charming, thoughtful curator with excellent taste and even better connections. Meanwhile, I was the bitter ex-wife. I could see it in the way people looked at me at events, the pitying smiles, the careful way they avoided asking about my personal life. I stopped going to those events. I focused on my work. I took on smaller projects, community-focused work that didn't pay well but mattered. I built a reputation separate from Julian, separate from the life we'd had together. And slowly, I started to rebuild myself. Then, 8 months after the divorce was finalized, the invitation arrived. I stared at that invitation for 3 days. It sat on my kitchen counter like a live grenade. Every time I walked past it, I felt something twist in my stomach. An engagement party for Julian and Simone. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Not just that he was getting engaged, I didn't care about that anymore, but that he wanted me there. That he wanted me to witness his happiness, to validate it, to participate in this public declaration that he'd moved on to something better. The handwritten note at the bottom made it worse. It would mean the world if you could come celebrate with us. Let's show everyone how far we've both come. Show everyone. That was what this was really about. He wanted to parade me in front of his friends, his family, his new fiancé, the cool, mature ex-wife who harbored no hard feelings, who could smile and clink glasses and prove that Julian Westbrook was such a great guy that even his ex-wife adored him. I should have thrown it away. I should have laughed it off, sent a polite decline, moved on with my life. But something about that note, that presumption that I would play along, that I would perform for him one more time, lit a fire I didn't know I still had. I called Denise, my divorce lawyer. "Tell me you're not actually considering going to this thing," she said when I told her about the invitation. "I'm considering it." "Alora, why would you do that to yourself?" I'm not doing it to myself, I said. I'm doing it for myself. I don't follow. He wants me there because he thinks I'm still the woman he married. The one who'll smile and play nice and make him look good. He thinks I'm still that person. And you want to prove you're not. I want to remind him who I am. Who I was before he spent 5 years convincing me I was too much and not enough at the same time. Denise was quiet for a moment, then she laughed. Okay, I'm listening. What do you need? I need you to pull something for me from the divorce files. The party was at a rooftop venue in Tribeca. Of course it was. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist aesthetic, caterers in crisp white shirts passing around appetizers that probably cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. I arrived exactly 30 minutes late. Not early enough to seem eager, not late enough to seem petty, just late enough to make an entrance. I wore a dress I'd designed myself and had tailored by a seamstress in my neighborhood. Deep emerald green, architectural lines, nothing flashy but absolutely intentional. My hair was natural, big, unapologetic curls that I'd spent years straightening for Julian's events. My mother's gold earrings, red lipstick. I looked like myself, finally. When I walked in, I saw Julian immediately. He was holding court near the bar, Simone beside him in a white cocktail dress that screamed future bride. She was laughing at something someone said, her hand on his arm, her engagement ring catching the light. He hadn't seen me yet. I watched him for a moment, this man I'd spent 5 years loving, and I felt nothing, no anger, no sadness, just a profound sense of distance like I was watching a stranger. Then he turned and saw me. His expression flickered, surprise, calculation, something else I couldn't name, before settling into a smile. He excused himself from the group and walked over, Simone trailing behind. Alora, he said my name like we were old friends. You came, I wasn't sure you would. Wouldn't miss it, I said evenly. He introduced me to Simone, who smiled with what seemed like genuine warmth. She was younger than I'd realized, maybe 25, pretty in that effortless way that comes from never having to worry about money or safety or whether you belong in a room. It's so nice to finally meet you, she said. Julian's told me so much about you. You're an architect, right? That's so cool. Cool, like my career was a hobby. Like the years I'd spent building something meaningful were just an interesting detail. I smiled. I am, what do you do, Simone? Oh, I'm Julian's assistant, but I'm actually working on my master's in art history. I'm hoping to curate someday. Of course she was. We made small talk. Julian was performing now, the gracious host, the evolved ex-husband, the man who'd grown beyond his past mistakes. He introduced me to several people as my ex-wife, Alora, the brilliant architect. Every introduction felt like a script he'd rehearsed. I played along, I smiled. I answered questions about my work, I complimented the venue, I was perfectly pleasant. And then Julian made his mistake. We were standing near the windows overlooking the city when he said, just loud enough for the people around us to hear, You know, Alora, I really admire how you've handled everything. The divorce, all of it. Not everyone could be this mature about it. There it was, the performance, the public absolution. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw what I'd been too in love to see years ago. Julian Westbrook was a man who needed to be admired more than he needed to be honest, who needed to win more than he needed to be kind, who would rewrite any story, hurt anyone, to maintain the image he'd built of himself. And I was done being a supporting character in his narrative. You're right, I said. It does take maturity. It takes maturity to realize when you've been complicit in your own erasure, to understand that sometimes people hurt you not because they're evil, but because they're selfish, to know the difference between forgiving someone and letting them convince you that what they did wasn't that bad. The group around us had gone quiet. Julian's smile tightened. I don't think this is the time or place. No, you're absolutely right, I interrupted. This isn't the time or place for honesty. This is the time and place for performance, for showing everyone how far we've both come. Isn't that what you said in your invitation? Simone was looking between us now, confused. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. Not the invitation, something else. Something I'd asked Denise to pull from the divorce files. I handed it to Julian. "What is this?" he asked. His voice had an edge now. "Just something I thought you might want to have back," I said. "A reminder." He opened the envelope. Inside was a single document, a prenuptial agreement that his lawyer had tried to get me to sign a week before our wedding. I'd refused. His mother had been furious. Julian had assured me it didn't matter, that he trusted me, that love was more important than legal contracts. But what Julian didn't know, what I'd only discovered during the divorce proceedings, was that he'd had a backup plan. A postnuptial agreement that his lawyer had drafted 6 months into our marriage, complete with provisions that would have left me with almost nothing if we'd divorced. He'd never had the courage to ask me to sign it. But the fact that he'd had it drawn up, that he'd planned for our ending while I was still believing in our beginning, told me everything I needed to know about who he really was. Attached to the postnup was a note from his lawyer, dated a week after I'd lost the baby. "Given recent events, you may want to wait to present this until things are more stable." Recent events. Our child dying was a recent event, a strategic consideration in the timing of a legal document. I watched Julian's face as he read through the papers, watched the color drain from his cheeks. "You had this drawn up a week after I lost our baby," I said quietly. "While I was still bleeding, still grieving, you were meeting with lawyers to figure out how to protect your assets in case I became inconvenient." Simone had gone pale. Several people had their phones out now, not even pretending not to watch. "Alora, this isn't. You're taking this out of context." "Am I?" I looked at Simone. "Did he tell you about the baby we lost? About how he stayed at Art Basel while I hemorrhaged alone in a hospital? Did he tell you that he asked his lawyer about divorce timelines before he asked me how I was feeling?" "That's not fair," Julian said. His voice was shaking now. "You can't just, this is my engagement party." "You invited me," I said. "You wanted me here. You wanted everyone to see how well-adjusted we both are, how we've moved past our failed marriage. So here I am, being honest about what that marriage actually was." I turned to Simone. She looked like she might cry. "I don't know you," I said to her, "and I'm not here to ruin your night. But I wish someone had told me before I married him that Julian Westbrook is a man who will always choose his image over your humanity, who will rewrite history to make himself the hero, who will let you believe you're not enough so he never has to confront the fact that he is less than he pretends to be." I looked back at Julian one last time. "Congratulations on your engagement," I said. "I hope she's everything you tried to make me believe I wasn't." I didn't wait for a response. I walked toward the exit with my head up and my shoulders back, every step feeling like reclaiming territory I'd lost years ago. Behind me, I heard the murmur of voices rising. Someone was crying, maybe Simone. Julian was trying to explain, his voice carrying that desperate edge of someone whose performance has been interrupted. I didn't care. I got to the elevator and pressed the button. The doors opened immediately, like the universe was on my side for once. As they started to close, I heard footsteps running. "Wait." Simone. She caught the doors just before they shut, slipped inside. We stood there in silence as the elevator descended. I could see her reflection in the polished metal doors, mascara smudged, hands shaking. "Is it true?" she asked finally. Her voice was barely a whisper. "About the baby." I looked at her, really looked at her, and I saw myself at 25, so desperate to be chosen by someone I thought was extraordinary that I ignored every warning sign that he was just ordinary with better PR. "Yes," I said. She nodded slowly. "He told me you guys just grew apart, that it was mutual, that you wanted different things." "We did want different things," I said. "I wanted a partner, he wanted an audience." The elevator reached the ground floor. The doors opened. Simone didn't move. "I don't know what to do," she said. I stepped out, held the door so it wouldn't close. "That's not my choice to make," I said. "But I'll tell you what I wish I'd known. Love isn't supposed to make you smaller. If you're constantly adjusting yourself to fit into someone else's story, it's not love. It's just a really elaborate audition for a role you'll never be good enough to keep. I let go of the door, started to walk away. Alora. I turned back. Thank you, Simone said. She was crying now, but her voice was steady. Thank you for not letting me go into this blind. I nodded. Take care of yourself. The doors closed. I found out later, through the inevitable gossip network that connects every industry in New York, that Simone broke off the engagement that night. Just walked out of the party, took off the ring, left it on the bar, and never looked back. Julian apparently spent the next week calling her, texting her, showing up at her apartment. She blocked him on everything and moved to LA to finish her master's degree at UCLA. Good for her. As for Julian, his reputation took a hit. Not a huge one. Men like him are remarkably good at surviving their own behavior. But enough. A few people who'd witnessed my little revelation at the party started asking questions about his other relationships, his business practices, the stories he told versus the reality he lived. The gallery where he worked quietly let him go 6 months later. Budget cuts, they said, but I knew better. I also knew I didn't care. Because here's what I learned in the weeks and months after that party. Closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you give yourself. For years, I'd waited for Julian to apologize, to acknowledge what he'd done, to validate my pain. I thought that's what I needed to move on. But standing in front of him at that party, holding that document, speaking my truth, that was closure. Not because he heard me, but because I finally heard myself. I started sleeping better. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my chest for 5 years started to loosen. I stopped checking his social media, stopped wondering what he was doing or saying or thinking about me. I just let go. My work started getting more attention. The community center I designed won an award from the American Institute of Architects. I was invited to speak at conferences, to teach workshops, to mentor young architects from underrepresented backgrounds. I started dadding again. Nothing serious at first, just relearning what it felt like to be seen by someone who wasn't trying to reshape me into their ideal. I went on some bad dates, some mediocre ones, a few good ones. And then I met someone who made me laugh, who asked questions and actually listened to the answers, who thought my big, loud, opinionated self was exactly enough. We took it slow. I'd learned my lesson about rushing into things, but it felt different. It felt like I was building something with someone instead of trying to fit into something someone else had already constructed. My mother noticed the change in me. We were having lunch in Queens one Sunday when she said, "You look lighter." Lighter, I asked. Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. She was right, I wasn't. About a year after the party, I got an email from Julian. No subject line, just a single sentence. "I'm sorry for everything." I stared at it for a long time, tried to figure out what I felt. Relief, vindication, anger that it had taken him this long. But mostly I felt nothing. Or not nothing, just a quiet sense of distance. Like he was someone I used to know a long time ago, someone who'd hurt me once but who no longer had any power over my present. I didn't respond. Some apologies come too late. Some apologies aren't meant to heal you, they're meant to absolve the person who hurt you. And I didn't owe Julian my forgiveness. I didn't owe him anything. I deleted the email and went back to my life. I still think about that night sometimes. Not the confrontation. That part feels almost like it happened to someone else. But the moment right after, when I walked out of that building into the cool night air and realized I'd just rewritten the ending of my own story. For years, I'd let Julian control the narrative. I'd let him decide who I was, what I was worth, how our relationship would be remembered. I'd been so afraid of seeming bitter or angry or like the stereotypical crazy ex-wife that I'd stayed silent about the truth of what he'd done. But that night, I'd taken the pen back. I'd said, "This is what happened. This is who you are. This is who I am." And the freedom in that, in refusing to perform, in refusing to shrink, in refusing to let his version of events be the only version that mattered, was worth every uncomfortable moment of that confrontation. People ask me sometimes if I regret going to that party, if I regret making a scene, if I think I should have handled it differently. And the answer is no. Because for 5 years, I'd handled things the way I was supposed to. I'd been understanding when Julian missed important moments. I'd been forgiving when he dismissed my work. I'd been patient when he cheated. I'd been mature when he divorced me. I'd spent 5 years being who everyone else needed me to be. That night, I was finally myself. The thing about becoming yourself again after you've lost yourself is that you realize how much time you wasted trying to be palatable. How many hours you spent smoothing out your edges so you wouldn't be too sharp, too loud, too much. I look at old photos of myself from my marriage and I barely recognize that woman. Not because I looked different, though I did, my hair straightened, my clothes more conservative, my smile more careful, but because of what I can see in my eyes, a kind of dimming, a light turned down low. My niece came to visit me a few months ago. She's 17, about to start college, full of dreams and opinions and fire. We were looking through old photo albums when she found a picture from my wedding. "You look so different," she said. "Different how?" "I don't know, smaller, like you were trying to fit into the frame instead of filling it." Out of the mouths of babes. "You're right," I said. "I was." "Why?" It was such a simple question, and such a complicated answer. "Because I thought that's what love required," I said finally. "I thought being loved meant being less, taking up less space, needing less, being less demanding, less opinionated, less me. That's messed up." I laughed. "It really is." "So what changed?" I thought about that invitation, about standing in front of Julian and refusing to play my part, about choosing my own dignity over his comfort. "I remembered that I was whole before I met him," I said, "and that I could be whole again without him." She nodded, processing. Then she said, "I'm going to remember that." "Good, please do. Save yourself about 5 years of confusion." Here's what I want you to understand, whoever you are watching this. Your story doesn't end when someone leaves. Your story doesn't end when someone betrays you. Your story doesn't even end when you lose yourself for a while in someone else's narrative. Your story is yours. And you can take the pen back whenever you're ready. It might be messy. It might be uncomfortable. People might think you're being dramatic or bitter or unforgiving. Let them. Because the alternative, staying silent, staying small, staying in a version of yourself that was designed to make someone else comfortable, is so much worse than any temporary discomfort that comes from telling the truth. I'm not going to lie to you and say everything is perfect now, that I've completely healed, that I never think about those 5 years and feel a flash of anger or regret. But I will say this, I like myself now. I like the woman I see in the mirror. I like her loud laugh and her strong opinions and her refusal to shrink. I like that she wears her hair natural and her voice clear and her expectations high. I like that she learned how to say no, how to set boundaries, how to walk away from people and situations that require her to be less than she is. I like that she's building a life that's actually hers this time. And if Julian Westbrook or anyone else doesn't fit into that life, well, that's not my problem anymore. The last time I saw Julian was completely by accident. I was at a coffee shop in Brooklyn, working on a proposal for a new project, when he walked in. He didn't see me at first. He was on his phone, talking to someone, looking exactly like he always looked. Expensive coat, perfect hair that practiced casual elegance that was his trademark. I watched him order, watched him wait for his coffee, watched him turn and scan the room for a seat. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he nodded, just a small acknowledgement, and I nodded back. He got his coffee and left. That was it. No conversation, no confrontation, no closure speech. Just two people who used to know each other acknowledging that they were now strangers. And you know what? That was exactly right. Because Julian doesn't get to be a chapter in my story anymore. He's a footnote, a lesson learned, A version of myself I had to lose in order to find who I really am. I finished my coffee, finalized my proposal, and went home to the life I'd built, slowly, intentionally, authentically, from the rubble of the one I'd lost. And that life is beautiful. Not because it's perfect, not because I've figured everything out, not because I never get lonely or scared or uncertain, but because it's mine. Every messy, imperfect, loud, unapologetic piece of it is mine. And I'm never giving that away again. What this taught me was that you can survive anything except living in permanent betrayal of yourself. The people who love you, really love you, won't require you to be smaller to make them feel bigger. And when someone shows you that they need you diminished in order to feel whole, believe them. Then walk away, not for them, for you. Your voice matters, your story matters, your whole, unedited, complicated, beautiful self matters. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise.